Okay, so last week we learned about the great reversal that happened with Esther and her accusation of Haman, and now it became time for now to change. Haman was killed, and that was very good, but still the decree remains, and that's the decree that Esther and Mordechai have to deal with now. And just to remind ourselves, do you have the text in front of you, Lenny? Or I could share the text if you need. I'll share the screen of the text. And so that day, right, Ahasuerus gives Esther everything that belongs to Haman, and Mordechai is now put in charge of all Haman's property, which is a great turn of events. But the decree still remains, and Esther now tries to get the king to reverse the decree, and that's their first desire, is that there shouldn't be a decree, because in the empire, the Persian Empire at that time, there were many people that hated the Jews even then, and we know that from what happened, the story of Ezra and Nehemiah, that there was a whole group of people that didn't like what the Jews were doing, and even then there was Jew hatred. So Esther and Mordechai tried to reverse the decree, and we have the next scene. Esther is falling in front of the king's feet and requesting that he revoke the decree, and that does not happen. That does not happen because although Ahasuerus is very eager to get rid of Haman, the whole idea of the Jews is not so important to him. And Esther makes a personal plea, and Ahasuerus is kind of justifying himself. He says, "I did what I could do," and he says, "I've given Haman's property to Esther," like he's talking to the people around even. What more can I do? I can't do any more. I put him on the stake against, I impaled him. And he makes it like a half-hearted thing. And you write what you want, whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I can't revoke the decree that was made. It doesn't seem like Ahasuerus is too eager, one way or another, to make any attempt to save the Jews. And he in his mind, it was an issue with Haman trying to rape the queen, or to take over his position. It had nothing to do with the Jews. And once he got rid of Haman, that was enough for him. And he seemed like almost imprisoned by the law, but also he was hiding behind the law. He didn't want to go too far out on a limb for the Jews. And now we get to a situation where Haman and Esther and Mordechai had a difficult situation in front of them. They have this decree, and the decree has been around for about 10 weeks. And all the people who hate the Jews in the whole big empire, the Persian Empire, I can see them, rubbing their hands and waiting for the time they're going to get the Jews and their property. And that's in Haman's original decree. It says to kill, to annihilate, to destroy all the Jews, and children and women, and to despoil all their property. So now the Jew haters around the empire, and they were a legion. They wanted to take advantage of it. They've been planning for 10 weeks. And Mordechai and Esther's position now was not only to win, but to prevent any Jews from being killed. And that's what they had to accomplish at this point. They had 10 more months, about 10 more months to go and to accomplish this. And Mordechai does a political campaign and has a couple of elements to it. And we'll explore these elements right now. What are the elements of Mordechai's political campaign? So, what does he have in his power? Number one, he has all Haman's property. Number two, he has the king's signet ring. So he can write any decree. Let's look at the decree that Mordechai makes, and that is the first step in his campaign, in his political campaign, to get the Jews ready and to have them not only win, but not have anyone killed. And there's a thing about political power and about power in general, is that power attracts power. And when you display power, then people who are powerful will join you, and people who are weak will keep away. And Mordechai at this point had to optimize the power that he had and really, I think, make a campaign to show this is going to be very strong, and the Jews are going to be very strong, even though they were in a weak position. The enemies of the Jews were more numerous, and they had like a head start on getting organized. And the psychology already was there that the Jews, this day is going to be a day of rampaging against the Jews.
Pardon me, Rabbi.
Yes.
Let me interrupt with a question. If Mordechai had the king Ahasuerus's signet ring, then was it unnecessary and an unnecessary risk on Esther's part to appeal to the king to save the Jews when Mordechai could have issued his own decree?
Well, he could not revoke the decree. So the Haman's decree was going to remain, and Esther wanted to have a revocation of that decree. So
I see. So the signet ring couldn't revoke a decree.
No, that was not possible according to the laws of Persia, and we know that already from what happened with Vashti, that he wanted Vashti back, but that was it. He was stuck, and I guess in the big empire that was a necessary rule, because otherwise you'd have decrees being given and revoked, and there'll be tremendous confusion. So the decree couldn't be revoked, and instead, that was the best situation to get back to square one. Was in the best situation in the sense that all of Haman's actions would have been erased, but that was impossible to achieve. So now the next best thing was you have the signet ring, make a decree. And let's look at the text of the decree that Mordechai makes. Now we're talking about the 23rd day of the third month of Sivan. So now it's, we've been through already Nisan, Iyar, the end of Sivan. We're almost 3 months into it. There's the 9 months left, or 8.5 months. And now letters are written at Mordechai's dictation to the Jews and to the satraps and governors and the officials, to every province in its own script, and just exactly like Haman's decree. It goes out to everyone and translated to every language. And what was that decree? And to this effect, in verse 11, the king has permitted the Jews of every city to assemble and fight for their lives. Now that's good. And you know what? Maybe that's all that's needed. But Mordechai says more in the decree. And if any people or province attacks them, they may destroy, massacre, and exterminate its armed force together with women and children and plunder their possessions. It's a little bit over the top. But it's exactly the words, to the word that Haman used in his decree. The only difference being, this is for anyone who goes up against them. not to all the non-Jews, not to all, it's to anyone who goes up against them. So Mordechai, the first step in his campaign to demoralize the enemies of the Jews is to say, you're going to get exactly what you wanted to give us. And that's part of the king's decree. The Jews not only have the permission to stand up and fight for their lives, but also to totally annihilate, destroy. I mean, the language here is very strong. Women and children, and plunder their possessions. It's a complete annihilation. And then, the day is given, the same day that Haman decreed that the first decree happened on the 13th day of Adar, which for us now is Tanit Esther. So the first step in Mordechai's campaign to turn around this evil decree was to put the same language that Haman used, to use it against the enemies of the Jews around the empire. That's the first step. The second step, now, even though Mordechai had the property of Haman now, and he does something else. He goes out. So first of all, the text of the document was to be issued as law in every single province. It was to be publicly displayed to all the peoples, that it goes out very strongly, just like Haman's decree went out. But then Mordechai does another step. Mordechai left the king's presence in royal robes of blue and white, with a magnificent crown of gold and a mantle of fine linen and purple wool. And the city of Shushan rang with joyous cries. The Jews enjoyed light and gladness, happiness, and honor. Mordechai makes a public display. He goes around like a king. And he is displaying power. He's displaying confidence. And the Jews, after they see that they can fight for their lives and also destroy all their enemies, the Jews are euphoric. They are joyous and happy, and the language here is so full of happiness that we get a chance to fight for ourselves, that it's another step in organizing the Jews. Imagine the demoralization that the Jews felt before that, with the enemies of the Jews probably going around saying, we can't wait to get we're going to rape your woman, and we're going to take your property, we're going to kill you, and that. And all the enemies of the Jews are waiting for this day. And it's reversal, not only with Haman being killed, but now with the Jews being able to take over and to fight for themselves. That is a tremendous reversal that it led to a giving back the morale, the fight in the Jewish people, and it led to a lot of happiness, a lot of joy. And the next important thing was a lot of organization, because now the Jews knew they have 10 months or 8.5 months to organize themselves, and they had to get involved. So now, not only in Shoshana Birah, but in all the countries where the Jews were, and that's the next psukim, and all the places where they were, there was a feast, there was a joy and a feast and a holiday, and many of the people of the land professed to be Jews, for fear of the Jews had fallen upon them. So now the tide has turned. The Jews are displaying power, even though they might not have been powerful, but now they're displaying power, they're displaying happiness and joy and gladness, and the decree is given now, the tide has turned, and now the people around the country, the empire, are seeing which side is on the ascendancy, and they decide, many people were deciding to make believe they're Jews, because they saw the winning side. And so this is part of the political strategy I would say, of Mordechai. But even though he defeated Haman, there still was a big thing ahead of him, and that was to organize the Jews to defend them. That not only they should win, but they should be completely defended against their enemies, and that's what Mordechai was successful in doing. So that's the political campaign that Mordechai took on. So now we go fast forward 8.5 months forward. We're in the 13th day of Adar, and now we get into the actual war. So it is the 13th day of the 12th month. We're in the middle of Adar, and it's the day that the two opposing decrees are going to be carried through, and it's that day when the king's command and decree were to be executed, the very day which the enemies of the Jews had expected to get them in their power. The opposite happened. The Jews got their enemies in their power. This is a kind of an overview. Throughout the provinces of King Ahasuerus, the Jews mustered in their cities to attack those who sought their hurt, and no one could withstand them, for the fear of them had fallen upon all the peoples. This is a tremendous reversal. Mordechai was successful in rallying the Jews all over the empire, probably something that hadn't happened since the exile. So this is, the Jews, even though they already had returned to Jerusalem and had built the second Beit HaMikdash, this organization, this political and military organization, hadn't existed until Mordechai, until this whole event happened with Mordechai and Esther and Haman. And even the governors and the princes and the satraps and all the peoples, they respected the Jews because of Mordechai's position. The fear of Mordechai had fallen upon them, and Mordechai was now powerful in the royal palace. He was really Haman's replacement in the terms of the authority that he now wielded, in terms of his ability to decree, and he walked around powerful. He magnified and amplified his power, not for the personal megalomania that Haman had, not for the personal aggrandizement, but for the fact that power was is a tool that was necessary to make the enemies of the Jews realize that they don't have a chance, and to make those sitting on the fence realize that the Jews were in the ascendancy now, and they should not align themselves with the enemy, the Jew haters, but with the Jews. And that was the greatness of Mordechai. Mordechai was now powerful in the royal palace. His fame was spreading throughout all the provinces. And it says, Ki haish Mordechai holech v'gadol. He was growing ever more powerful. They just have this scene, like the scene where in the Hulk, where the person turns into the Hulk and he gets bigger and bigger. Mordechai is like getting his reputation and his power is growing larger. And again, power is not a negative thing when used by the right person, when used for the right reasons. In fact, not only is it not a negative thing, power is necessary. You can be a saint and powerless, and there's not really too much place where your power can be used for the good. But a powerful person is also a saintly person, like Mordechai was, and uses his power for the good. That's really the best of situations. So Mordechai managed to get all the people's power, all the power of Haman, but use it in a way to make all the enemies of the Jews afraid of attacking, afraid of fighting the Jews. But there still was a battle, and that's what we see in the next section of the Megillah, that there was a fight because there were enemies, and even though Mordechai was successful in swaying the public opinion, And in organizing the Jews, there was a fight, and many people died. In Shushan itself, right there, in the capital, in the fortress of Shushan, 500 people killed, and the 10 sons of Haman were killed. And now, look at verse 11. When the number of those slain in the fortress was reported on the same day to the king, and here it mentions, of course, all the 10 children of Haman, the 10 sons of Haman that were killed. And I forgot an important point. But they did not lay hands on the spoil. The Jews did not take so even though they had the ability and the permission, according to the decree, to take the spoil, the fact that they stayed away from it shows that they were not in it for personal gain. They were in it to defeat their enemies and defend themselves. And that's a key point over here. They didn't need that incentive that Haman had used with the enemies of the Jews. They just wanted to get rid of their enemies. And the 10 sons of Haman and 500 men were killed because they were still enemies of the Jews. And the number of those killed in Shushan came to the king. Now, the king is probably thinking, what did I get myself into? 500 people killed in one day in his capital city. Yet, when the number of the people killed in Shushan came to the king comes to Queen Esther, and this is like the first time. Look at the reversal that happens over here. Up to now, only a couple of months ago, Queen Esther feared for her life in going to the king. And now the reversal of power, the king finds out 500 people were killed in his town, and he is now coming to Queen Esther. And he tells her, in the fortress in Shoshana Binah alone, the Jews have killed a total of 500 men, and the 10 sons of Israel. What then what they have done in the provinces of the realm? We don't know what's happening in the whole country. But what is your wish now? Because here, for the first time, Ahasuerus approaches Esther and tells her, what do you want? And then she goes further. If it please your majesty, let the Jews in Shushan be willing to act tomorrow as they did today, and let Haman's 10 sons be impaled on the stake. Esther has the power now, and Esther can request a further day and also to display the dead bodies of Haman's children. Again, to infuse the Jewish people with the morale to keep the fight up, to defend, and also to destroy the enemies. Esther knew that there were more enemies of the Jews in Shushan, and she requests another day, and also to demoralize the enemies, that their Haman's 10 sons also be displayed on the stake. And the king agrees. So now, again, another day of killing, and another 300 people were killed. And again, the Jews do not take the spoils, even though they were permitted to. 75,000 people killed throughout the whole empire, and also the Jews do not put their hands on the spoils of war. So now, we get into the question, and this was on the 13th day of the month of Adar, rested on the 14th day, and this is and the Jews in Shushan. They kill 75,000 people, and they don't lay their hands on the spoil. This is on the 13th day of Adar, and they rested on the 14th day. And Shushan, they did the 13th and 14th, rested on the 15th, and they made it a day of feasting and happiness. This is a rough section for I was once in a town where I lived in Kiryat Tivon, and I gave a joint class with a Reform rabbi, and he said, in our synagogue, we don't read chapter 9 in the Megillah, we skip it. So chapter 9 is a chapter where the war happens and where the Jews carry out this, I would say, this tremendous victory against their enemies. I say, why don't you read it? He says, well, because we are against war. I thought to myself, and I said it out loud, it's very nice to be against war. You have to also hope that your enemies are against war also. So when the decree was made that the Jews can stand up and fight for themselves, and they can fight against their enemies, and only against those who are going to stand up against them. So war is something that we don't want to have to use, but so let's say there's a lot of things that speak about the swords being beat into plowshares, and we try not to go to war. However, when there's a need for war, if we are unprepared or not willing to carry out what has to be done, so then we end up being killed. And that's really the morality of power. We mentioned a little bit before. If you're not going to have power to stand up for yourselves, if a nation doesn't have that power, no matter how good the nation is, the nation won't survive. Because we do live in a world that unfortunately uses power to get their way. Nations use their power, and it's part of the way the world is. Maybe it's a dirty part of the world, an unsavory part of the world. Nevertheless, it still is part of the world that we live in. The messianic prophecies of swords being beat into plowshares are just that. They're prophecies for the time of the Messiah. They represent an ideal. They present something to strive and hope for. But if we start living like that before the whole world has gotten to that ideal, then we won't survive. And I said that to that person I said it to the Reform rabbi. He didn't buy my answer. There was a book written after the 1967 war. It's a book that said, two books I remember. One of them, what if we lost? What if we had lost? What would have happened? And it describes this complete rout that would have happened and really would have been annihilated in Israel in 1967. Another book was written, I'm Sorry We Won, which was written by Ephraim Kishon, a satirist, an Israeli satirist, that was making fun of those who used the 67 war and were berating Israel for winning. So war is unfortunately, and power is unfortunately a necessary part of the world, part of existence. And here we see Mordechai and Esther. They managed to organize the Jews to defend themselves, to turn their somewhat political advantage to a tremendous political power to really bring about a routing of all the enemies of the Jews on that day. Mordechai did it by strategically making the decrees that we can, using the same language of Haman, showing himself as being the authority, walking around like a king, getting the Jews all excited and happy in Shoshana Bira and throughout the whole country, throughout the whole empire, getting more and more of the governors and satraps and all the other rulers to realize that the Jews are on the ascendancy now, and therefore to side with the Jews instead of with their enemies. And that swayed many of the people to want to become, to make believe they were Jews themselves, seeing which way it was going. Esther, we see the reversal of Esther gaining the power, where Hashverosh now comes to her, and almost as if he's seeking her favor, giving her whatever she wants. And she wants to very boldly presses the war, the defending against the Jews, against the enemies of the Jews, for another day. And we see the Jews themselves are not interested in for the wealth and for the loot and for the bounty they're going to get, but just to defend themselves and really wipe out all the enemies. So this was a turning point in Jewish history, where the reversal of power that happened really probably lasted for years going forward, where it caused a very memorable reputation for the Jews. You don't mess with them, and throughout much of the Persian period, the Jews were in a very comfortable situation throughout the Persian Empire. In fact, only until where hundreds of years go by, where Alexander the Great takes over the Persian Empire, and then only with the advent of the Jewish Hellenizers, centuries later, do we see another conflict happening where the Jews are being attacked, and only because other Jewish people call them in. So this victory, this triumph on the part of Mordechai and Esther has far-reaching ramifications, and was a tremendous reversal. Lenny, any questions or anything that comments, or feel free?
Well, it's a very sophisticated political tale, among other things. I'm just very impressed by its complexity.
Yeah, we tend to overlook it, because we're so concerned with the happiness and the reading of it and the noise and the hullabaloo that happens with it, that we don't really see so much went into it, and it was not a foregone conclusion that they would win.
It also does speak to modern times. I mean, we have a war going on now, and Israel was wringing its hands about whether it can afford to condemn Putin at the United Nations, because it needs the support of Russia against Syria.
Yes.
And even though it was, I believe it was late in issuing its a UN condemnation, the media in the United States attacked Israel, Christian Amanpour, for its hesitancy, so you have to be very politically savvy, and have to understand when you can afford to compromise, when compromise is necessary, and when you have to stand up and act on principle.
Yes. It's really the balance between the principle and realpolitik that have to be taken into account. And I think Israel did what had to be done, which was support the Ukrainians against aggression, against the violation of its borders, and even though there might be some arguments made for Russia feeling threatened by NATO's coming on their border, still the way to resolve it is not by going into by an incursion into their country. And some people in Israel were now saying, yeah, but you know what? You look at the Ukrainians; they hated during the Holocaust. They were more cruel than the Nazis, and they were willing executioners, to use the title of the Nazis. My answer to these people is, you have to look not only at the past, but at what kind of world order do you want? When you have a world order that's based on might makes right, you're going to have more and more wars, more and more conflicts being resolved by the use of violence and more bloodshed. And we don't want a world like that. So it means standing up at this point and fighting the aggression. The use of power sometimes is moral. The use of force and violent force is moral if it stops a further killing. People speak about Truman and his decision to use the atom bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and he was facing the possibility of 100,000 casualties of United States soldiers because of the Japanese theory of war, or a war you fight to the last man, right? Bushido. And he said, I'm not going to have that happen. And what was interesting, I always ask myself, after the first atomic bomb fell or was dropped, why they need a second one? And the answer is because the Japanese did not surrender after the first one. They saw this tremendous destruction that happened in Hiroshima, and they kept on, they didn't surrender them. And so therefore the second one had to be utilized. Truman, by the way, said that we'll continue doing it until you surrender, which was an empty bluff because they only had two. But nevertheless, you want to end the war quickly. So sometimes the initial use of very, very overwhelming strength is a moral act, because it shortens the violent conflict, and it leads to less casualties in the long run. I think people, say, "Oh, there's the overuse of force." Sometimes they complain about Israel. It was unbalanced or something. Well, too much force being used. But that's the moral way of doing things, because it finishes the conflict very quickly. And when a conflict finishes quickly, there's fewer casualties, and it's actually the more moral way. The immoral way is to be hesitant, to be weak about it, letting your enemy think they can still fight you, and it leads to more casualties and more conflict. So, okay, this is next week. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll finish up the Megillah, and we'll do to the part of now how this event, one-time event, becomes a yearly festival, which was actually a major change, because you have to remember, up to this time, no festivals were added. This is the first. Purim becomes the first non-Torah festival that's added in the people of Israel. So,
actually, I have a question about flipping through the calendar. I noticed that there is also a Purim Katan, which is already passed in early February. So what is that all about?
Well, that's in the year that when you have two Adars in a leap year, in the Jewish leap year, when you have two Adars. So there's always a question of which Adar is the real one, and the second one is the real Adar. But the first one has a little bit of an echo of Adar. It's called Adar Rishon, the first Adar, and so on the first Purim we let on Yudalet of the first Adar, to remind ourselves that what happened on the Yudalet of the second Adar, we have a Purim Katan, which is maybe an excuse for a party, or not a party, but a little bit of a happiness on that day as well. But it's just it's only on the days where you have only in the years that you have a leap year, you have two adars. They do we remind ourselves that Purim's coming in a month. That's it.
Okay. Okay.